All right, everyone, welcome to this edition of Believe in Bills, presented by FanDuel. I'm Adam Benigni, joined by Sal Maiorana of the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. As always, end of season news conference, and far from an ordinary one, featuring owner Terry Pegula and newly promoted president of football operations and general manager Brandon Beane today in the wake of the firing of Sean McDermott. Sal, I mean, we've got a lot of ground to cover here and a lot to react to. Generally speaking, I mean, we covered the drought years and all of that, and I don't want to get too extreme with this, but it seems like there's been a reversion back in a lot of ways, doesn't it?
Well, I'm not going to go that far because, Adam, we've seen a lot of crazy stuff that's happened at One Bills Drive, and even in that very room, some of those press conferences were Ralph Wilson that just went off the rails. So I'm not going to quite take it to that level. But yeah, it was very interesting today, many of the things that were said. And what was the most surprising thing, of course, was that Terry Pegula came out of his cave for the first time, at least for a Bills event that I can remember. It's been 6 or 7 years at least on the Bills side that he's spoken to reporters, maybe longer. I don't even remember. I expected him to go out there today and, wish Sean McDermott well, and then just turn the mic over to Brandon Beane and walk off stage. And he sat there for the whole hour. And not only did he take questions, he actually interjected some answers when the questions weren't being asked of him, which was really surprising. So, yeah, we could go through a bunch of these different things. But that, to me, was the first surprising thing, was that Pegula actually stood there with his feet to the fire and answered reporters' questions. And I thought there were a lot of good questions that were asked today.
And let's start from the beginning when he talked about what went into the decision, right? Yeah. And the fact that he says he essentially made it in the post-game locker room after the loss to the Denver Broncos. And with the emotions and everything. And kind of in the context, it seems like that would be made, in a hasty sort of way. But then when he talked about hitting the ultimate playoff wall and all of those sort of things, I kind of had the sense that this had been in the works maybe for a while if the Bills didn't reach a certain level in the postseason. Based on today, that gets a little bit murkier. What was your read on all of that?
Look, Adam, our buddy Vic Carucci had it for you guys on your website, this meeting that allegedly took place, 5-6 weeks ago. I asked Pegula and Beane that specific question. It was one of the first things that was asked today. I said, there's a report that there was a meeting and Sean expressed dissatisfaction with the roster. Can you comment on that? And Pegula, of course, totally said that didn't happen. Doesn't know where that came from. I trust Vic. I trust my man Vic to get it right. If he had a source that gave him that, I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Brandon really didn't comment on that. In fact, Pegula kind of hogged that conversation. I don't even recall that Brandon got a chance to talk about that because Pegula jumped all over it. So you're right. This was not, he could say whatever he wants to say, but he didn't make this decision in a snap judgment when he saw Josh Allen crying in the locker room and then looked around at all the other devastation and decided, well, we can't win the big one with Sean. I can't have my players suffer like this. We're going to fire him. This has been going on for a few weeks. And, Brandon kind of denied, and so did Pegula, that there was any dissolving of the relationship between these three guys. But come on. Clearly there was. All you had to do was listen to Sean McDermott and some of the subtle digs that he was giving Beane in the last few weeks regarding roster decisions. So, yeah, Terry says that maybe it was the final straw. The Denver loss, I would accept that it was the final straw, and he decided. But he didn't go into the locker room thinking Sean McDermott's going to be his coach and then saw Josh crying and decided to fire him. That's what he made it sound like. That wasn't the case. Come on. No one's believing that.
What was your opinion of when he listed off the numbers there in the Bills playoff seedings over the years in kind of an obscure way, right? In the form of a question. And his take that the roster's been adequate during that time and the coaching hasn't. There's arguments for both sides. Certainly this year, the argument that the roster was sufficient clearly falls short. The way his rationale, that sort of a thing, and making this move and promoting Beane, how does that sit with you?
Yeah, that was surprising. We didn't quite know. He asked the question what these numbers mean. Yeah, we had no clue. To me, you reel off those seeds that the Bills had in the last 7 years, seems to me it's a pretty good indication that the coaching staff did a pretty good job with the team to get them in that position to win 5 straight AFC East titles. Yes, they didn't get to the final goal, but just naming those seeds, that was an indication that, yeah, we had it pretty good here for a while. And you're right. He did not give McDermott or the coaches really any of the satisfaction for that. He kind of said, his implication was that we got those seeds because of the rosters that Brandon Beane provided Sean McDermott. And he even said at one point, I'm almost positive he said, we had a great team and good coaching. I mean, man, that was kind of a slap in the face to Sean McDermott and his staff. I was surprised by the lack of recognition that they gave McDermott and his coaching staff, not only this year, but past years, to have taken that team from the dumpster to where they eventually did get them. It was a lot of supporting of Brandon Beane. I made the right decision. I picked the right guy to move us forward. And that struck me. He thanked Sean and his family in the first minute, and that was pretty much it in terms of recognizing a 98-50 record in the regular season.
All right, the term power play has come in
to
usage here. And it seemed that way based on the reports that, Beane sort of won out and gets the promotion. McDermott is shown the door. There were denials on that front today. And you kind of heard it from Beane himself, challenging anyone who would walk into the building on that assertion, that sort of a thing. Your response to his takes and your interpretation of that.
Yeah, I've kind of been on the side of, I don't think that Brandon pulled a power play here. I don't. I think he had the ear of the owner. He's the one that sits with the owner during these games. Sean McDermott, Sean sees him frequently. Brandon Beane sees him a whole lot more, and his conversations are much deeper, I think, with Beane than they ever would have been with McDermott. So I think he had the owner's ear. I think Pegula recognized that there was a lot of injuries this year. So he's not going to blame Beane for that. Now, we can all make the case, and we have, that this roster wasn't very good to begin with. At least in my opinion, it was a good roster. It wasn't a Super Bowl winning roster, and that's before the injuries hit. So he is clearly siding with Brandon Beane here, but in my heart of hearts, Adam, I don't think that Beane was pulling a power play to shove McDermott out the door. Now, maybe I'm being naive here, but I've witnessed those two guys together for the better part of 9 years, and they were always pretty much in lockstep. I would say this was really the first year where you could really sense there was a little bit of tension behind the scenes. But I like and respect Brandon, and I'm going to kind of believe that he was not purposely trying to pull a power play. And I think the owner decided, for the reasons we've already stated, that he felt they hit the proverbial wall and it was time to move on. And he picks Brandon Beane to take the team to the next level. That's where I'm going to sit on it. Maybe you have a different opinion. Maybe you think that Beane did purposely try to push him out. I don't think he did.
I think that in business and in life, relationships can become strained, right?
Yep.
And I think that probably under the pressure and under the circumstances and the performance of the team and the challenges that the team faced, that happened. And that happens over time. So inevitably, I think there's an element of that plays in. I do think that this, was a snowball that was sort of building, right? And it wasn't necessarily just the immediate reaction that Pegula referred to today. But a lot of bizarre things happened in this press conference. The whole Keon Coleman thing, where Pegula stepped in and said that it was coaching that wanted that selection, and Beane was a team player. Later, Pegula apparently clarified to John Warrow of the Associated Press that he wasn't specifically referring to McDermott that was pushing for Coleman. But boy, that's a bad look, isn't it?
Yeah,
for that discrepancy to take place in an end-of-season news conference like that, as much as Beane tried to correct for it and take responsibility for it. If I'm a player on that roster, if I'm Keon Coleman, I mean, where do you go with him from here?
Yeah, that was surprising. Another question that I asked, I asked that question. I was actually asking Brandon the question about the wide receiver room. And do you think you did enough You've obviously had trouble in free agency, Curtis Samuel and Josh Palmer I mentioned. And then when I said the drafting of Keon Coleman clearly hasn't worked out, Pegula interrupted me before I finished the question and said, well, I want to comment on Keon Coleman. Okay, sir, go ahead. And he was the one, like you said, he said that the Keon Coleman decision was the coaching staff pushing for that, not Brandon Beane. Now, that's bullshit. that is bullshit. And Beane, to his credit, he didn't call it bullshit, but he did own up to the fact that I'm the one with the card at the end of the day. I listened to all the input. I pulled the trigger and picked Keon Coleman. There's Elena Getzenberg, our friend who covers the team for ESPN. She put up a point about draft night. That night, after the first round was over, Beane comes down, after they picked Coleman, he had said that first thing in the morning, when they start getting their board ready, they have the first pick in the second round. Or was it the second pick of the second round, Adam? It was the first pick. And I think he said, if we go to bed and Keon Coleman is still there, he's going to be there. He's going to be their guy. So they had all day Friday to change their mind on Keon Coleman, and they didn't. And Beane made the pick. So yeah, I'm sure that Joe Brady had some input in that. If they liked Keon, Sean, I'm sure did too. But you can't tell me that you're going to blame the coaching staff on Keon Coleman. This is a scouting decision. Those guys are all under Brandon Beane, and they made the talent evaluation that this guy was going to be good enough to be the first pick of the second round and would be somebody who would help the Bills for the next 4 or 5 years. So yeah, I think Pegula lied to us there, and he kind of botched the whole situation. And like you said, he threw Keon under the bus. And that really was a classic throw a guy under a bus comment.
How much does it bother you that an owner would do that in that situation?
I think here's the problem, Adam. He is so not used to dealing with the media. He's not. He's probably great in the boardroom and in, high level meetings, but you get him on the spot like this. He's proven in the past that he is not good at answering questions from the media. And I think that's part of the problem. I think he kind of stumbled his way through that situation. And if he was a little more polished, and maybe if he talked to the media a little more, maybe he'd get better at it. But every time it seems like he goes in front of cameras, he seems to put his foot in the mouth. And he certainly did on that one.
I feel like the perception of this franchise from the outside has changed, right, in these past couple of days. Now, how long that lasts remains to be seen. But whether it's what went on today, how the McDermott situation was handled, the fact that Beane has more power now and it's a little bit of a different structure as far as NFL front offices are concerned, and now you've got to attract candidates in here. How much of an impact does that all have on sort of the status of things moving forward and who they might be able to attract for this thing?
Look, the Bills for most of the last 9 years have become and have been recognized one of the most stable franchises in the league. They had the continuity with the coach and GM and the quarterback now. 8 years. That threesome has been together for 8 years now. They've won division titles. They have been one of the most stable, very good franchises. And the last couple of days, yeah, I think that core has been shaken a little bit. I think the widespread view nationally, at least in the media, and maybe fans too, are questioning why they would fire Sean McDermott. Now, locally, you have that vocal lunatic fringe minority that's wanted McDermott fired since 13 seconds. That's never going to change. But I think on the whole, I think people are surprised the Bills made this move, given his success and the playoff appearances that they've had. I know it hasn't been good enough to take the final step. I think it's surprising. And now today, this added a layer of craziness to the Bills situation for sure. Now, here's the thing, Adam. There's only 32 of these jobs in the NFL. This is not going to impact in any way, as far as I'm concerned, the type of candidate that they're going to get to take this job. The issue is going to be they need to pick the right guy. There's going to be plenty of options for this job. People are going to die to come here and coach the Bills. Even though we don't think this roster is great, they have an opportunity to change some things and make it better, and you've got Josh Allen. So anybody who interviews for this job is going to be salivating in the hope that they get it. So I don't think it's going to impact that, but they got to pick the right guy. Of all these candidates, they have to nail this pick.
All right, so let's talk about the candidates, whether it's Joe Brady, Brian Daboll, names coming to the surface, Anthony Lynn, Grant Udinsky. Lou Anaromo, Anthony Weaver, and we'll see who else emerges from the list. I mean, FanDuel, presenting sponsor for this show and others on the Believe Network, has Daboll as the favorite, and there's obvious reasons behind that, given the relationship between he and Josh and his run here as offensive coordinator and helping to vault Allen to the level of success that he enjoys now and the franchise enjoys now. But Beane insists this is going to be a wide open and thorough search. You would think offensive mind, but of the candidates that have sort of emerged or who might, would you agree that a Daboll is a favorite, at least early on here?
Well, early on, yeah, because the ties are so obvious. He's got head coaching experience, even though it clearly didn't go well in New York. And that kind of has me a little bit skeptical of Daboll, to be honest with you. A terrific offensive coordinator. And we talk often about how some guys are just meant to be coordinators and maybe not head coaches. And I don't think he distinguished himself in any way in New York, not only with the coaching part of it, but just the way he carried himself. And, you know, I think Bills fans love a screamer, which McDermott wasn't. He's kind of a screamer, Daboll. So is that really what you want as your face of your franchise? I don't know. So I can see why Daboll is the favorite because of the past history, because he's a Western New York guy. But I wouldn't, if I'm the Bills, I wouldn't jump to that conclusion right away and make him the front runner for the job. I just wouldn't. Joe Brady, on the other hand, already here, at least knows the offensive side of the roster. I think he's going to get a serious look at this. If you had to ask me who would I prefer, I'd probably lean towards Daboll. I don't think that Joe Brady is ready to be a head coach now. And there's younger guys that they're going to talk to for this job who probably aren't ready either. I just don't see it in Brady right now. He reminds me of one of these guys who might be just a really good offensive coordinator. And I do believe he's a good coordinator. I think he is a creative guy. If he had more talent at his disposal this year, things probably go a little bit different. But the one thing I always go back to on Brady, Adam, is that in 2.5 years, this has been a place where wide receivers go to die under Brady. He has not been able to get anything out of the receiver group, at least downfield. So that would be a concern for me. I mean, unless they're going to all of a sudden bring in a Jamar Chase type or maybe two of those guys that he can work something with, I'm not real confident in Joe Brady being that guy. So those are the two local guys. You want to throw other names out and have your opinion, go ahead.
No, I would say Daboll over Brady. I think Daboll at least has had experience and some success in New York in that role. But I guess I question, as far as Daboll is concerned, his ability as a CEO, that sort of a thing. Did he learn from his time in New York? Can he use some of that experience to his advantage? The relationship with Josh is obvious. We'll see about Clint Kubiak, Seattle's offensive coordinator, Davis Webb, Denver's passing game coordinator. Those are a couple of other names I think you'll probably hear. But if it's Daboll as the favorite, I just have, they lose something. I guess my point is they lose that CEO, how McDermott evolved and the culture and all of those things, which has fueled a lot of the success and the buy-in among players and all of that. I mean, I think that goes out the door with Sean. And it's incumbent upon someone else who comes in. And is Daboll that guy? I'm not sure. That's my reaction to that. That
is the issue. Some people don't quite understand that aspect of being a head coach. Everyone wants to point to, well, he's a defensive-minded head coach. His defense wasn't very good. There's so much more that goes into being a head coach in the NFL. And you would that's why the talk about Davis Webb, I understand he's kind of the hot candidate and all that. He's never even been a coordinator and play caller in the NFL. How do you expect a 30-year-old guy to come in and be the CEO of a team, which is what he'd have to be? That's why you talk about Daboll, you talk about Brady. Brady's also a young guy. I don't quite see that right now out of Joe Brady or Davis Webb. I don't know really Webb at all, or Grant Udinsky, who's from the Jaguars, also 30 years old. These guys are so new to the game, or new to the position, I should say. That's a tough ask for me. You got a Bills team that, they think they're still Super Bowl contender with a superstar quarterback, and you're going to turn the keys to the car over to a guy who just got his permit. That's a tough call for the Bills. I think it's got to be someone who's got a little bit more experience. You talk about some of the other guys that you just reeled off there. Lou Anarumo. All right, he's had some success as a defensive coordinator. I don't see that being a fit at all. And then Anthony Lynn and Anthony Weaver. Look, I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but the Bills do have to fulfill the Rooney rule. They have to hire, or they have to interview at least 2 minority candidates. Anthony Lynn, I think, is exactly what that is, quite frankly. Weaver, I think, has a little more chops right now. Just had a pretty good year, second half of the year in Miami. He's been a respected guy for a little while, and so is Anthony Lynn. But I think Weaver, of those two, would be the better option. But it just feels like that feels like a Rooney rule, notification, whatever you want to call it. I don't think either one of those guys are serious candidates. It's going to be telling what happens with this weekend's games, who becomes available to talk to. If they're really in on Clint Kubiak, you might be waiting 3 weeks for that, because I fully believe that they're going to beat the Rams. If you're really into Davis Webb, either as a coach, head coach, or a coordinator, you might have to wait. It's going to be interesting to see where this goes. And if the Bills don't make a move next week, right, then we kind of realize, either they really have their eyes on one of those other guys, or they're just going to take it out to the very end and interview as many guys as they can to make sure they get the right guy. So,
all right.
But the problem with that approach, though, is there's still 6 or 5 other jobs available, right? So how long can you wait? If you've got an A, B, and C list, how long can you wait? Is your A guy still going to be there when it comes time to pull the trigger?
That's why I feel like if Daboll checks out, he could be the guy.
He could.
Right.
He could. Like I said, it'll be real interesting to see who's available this weekend. The Rams have a few guys on their staff that, their name, Chris Shula, the defensive coordinator, Shieldhouse, I think is his name, is their passing game coordinator, another really young guy who's never been a coordinator. But those names have popped up for the Bills. I think even Mike LaFleur's name, who's the offensive, McVay is the play caller, but he is technically, LaFleur is the coordinator, I think. All those guys, their names have come up in other coaching searches. We'll see. Denver, I don't think Vance Joseph would be a candidate here. I think that would not be something I'd be interested in. But, Davis Webb is somebody who they should at least get a chance to interview. According to media reports, he's interviewed with, I think, the Ravens and the Raiders, I want to say, and he's blown them away with their interviews. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there.
All right, so a lot of ground still to cover. Just what we thought was going to be, an intense with a new stadium and everything else. But this offseason now has taken on a whole new dimension with the coaching search. And Josh Allen, they did clarify, is going to be involved among many in that. So he'll obviously have influence in it as well. So that covers the ground for today. Much more still to come as these interviews commence. So a lot of work to do here on Believe in Bills. But that's going to do it for this edition. For Sal Maiorana, the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, I'm Adam Benigni, WGRZ TV and Sports Talk Live Buffalo. Thanks for being with us here on Believe in Bills.